Okay, my name is Graham Atwell. I'm for an organisation called Pontedusky, which is based in Valencia in Spain. I'm going to talk about generative AI, assessment, and the future of jobs and careers. And at first I thought this was too many subjects, but thinking about it, I realised that assessment and the future of jobs and careers are completely linked. So I'm going to try and take you through and show you those links. Well, what is generative AI? I guess you've discussed this already this morning, but it's artificial intelligence capable of generating text, images, or other data using generative models, often in response to prompts. But first I want to say, how do we see AI? Because I think that's a problem. AI is everywhere, on the television, on the newspapers, in academic life, LinkedIn. We have AI everywhere, but what do we see of AI? And I think one of the problems is that a lot of the illustrations of AI are misleading. We try and make them have a human face. They are not robots. AIs may have robots in it, and often does, or robots have AI in them, but they don't look human. And I think we've got to understand these are machines. AI is a machine, a very advanced machine, but it is a machine. And so I think these images are difficult. And that's why I very much like this Better Images of AI website. I'm going to show you quite a few images from that site. And I'm going to show you some pictures, because I think the pictures and the way of telling a story are important. Now, let's go on to ask some more questions. Why do we do assessment? What's the purpose of it? And this was a quick Google search that I did. Is it for diagnosis? Is it to give educators feedback? Is it to evaluate the potential of different forms of learning? Is it to determine competence for employment or a career? Is it to improve the learning experience for students? Is it to determine a school leader or teacher's grades and pay rates? That's a lot of different things, but we're calling them all assessment. And I think one of the key things using AI or not for assessment is that we understand why we are doing it. And of course, in the academic world, we talk about assessment as being vital for academic integrity, and related concepts such as originality, authenticity, truth, and accountability. And that's a very, very big agenda. Now, we can identify different forms of assessment. Well, there's various ways to look at it, but the big things about it is that, first of all, it should be valid. We say it should be valid, and it should be reliable. Actually, sometimes those two are in conflict. If you think about driving tests, or I think assessment like that, or medical assessments, validity and reliability may not be the same. But assessment, as we use it, can be diagnostic, to find out what someone knows. When I've been on a language course, the first thing they usually give me is a diagnostic test to see how much Spanish I can actually talk. It can be summative. That's the traditional end of year exams or entry for university exams or for degrees. Or, and I'm going to talk more about this, it can be formative. It can be part of the learning experience and built into it. And I think those distinctions are very important. Now, this is quite a good picture it shows you. And there's one there, assessment as learning. Is assessment a learning process for self-regulation, for critical evaluation? Is it assessment for learning to give feedback on learning and teaching? Or is it assessment of learning to demonstrate achievement? There's a lot more in this slide, but I'll leave that for you to look at afterwards, I hope. But first of all, generative AI. What's the reaction of education to generative AI? Well, pretty much panic. Panic would be the worst. When it came out December last year, December the year before last now, the whole education world went into panic. But this panic is nothing new. I'm old enough to remember quite a lot of panics. The panic when slide rules came in. Should we be allowed to use slide rules in exams? And we used them in my mathematics classes at school because this predated technology. But when it came to exams, we weren't allowed to use slide rules. And then, of course, up on the top left, you can see these machines, these calculating machines, these powerful machines. Well, that was a new panic. Should students be allowed to use them, or should they be learning algebra themselves? And of course, panic over books. No books in exams. No books in exams in most countries. Shouldn't be allowed to use that, despite the fact that in the real working world, we would never research something without using books, if they're online books or paper books. And then, of course, the panic over the internet. I can remember when I was working for the exam board, the Welsh Joint Education Committee in Cardiff, in Wales. The computer system there, we were running word processors on coded markup language. Then came the first WYSIWYG things. It was WordPerfect was the system then. Then Microsoft brought out Word. And that Word, of course, had this wonderful thing of not needing markup language. So what they did is they went around every room and turned off the WYSIWYG system to force people to use markup language, because they said they won't learn if they use this new easy system. And now, of course, we got AI, and we have the new panics around AI, although I think it's calming down slightly. Now, when we come to talk about technology and assessment, I think it's really important to think it's not generative AI which invented AI. We've had AI around for a long time, probably in much more ways. Everybody's carrying around AI devices. It's built into our telephones, but it's been used in assessment for a long time. And this slide is from the City and Guilds International Qualification Board based in London. And it shows different assessment types using technology and looks at whether or not it can be automated assessment or human marking. And I think it's quite important to note some of the figures here, that since late 1990s, they've been using technology for assessment, delivering now, this is 2 years ago, 1.5 million tests a year to over 3,000 centres. And 65,000 tests were marked online per month, 750,000 per year, using online, using AI, and using AI. So generative AI is not a new thing for assessment. It's been around for a very long time. Let's move to the next slide. And this is once more from City and Guilds. And they're talking about how is down to how you play back the outcomes to the learner or other stakeholders. So you're developing your model of using AI in assessment, and there are different models, and you have to consider really what the purpose and nature of the judgments are to dictate what different assessment models are acceptable. And technology has an increasing role to play in all stages of assessment and all learning. Now, in response to the panic that AI is going to destroy our assessment models, I would say AI has done us a favor in many ways, because we should have been looking at how we're doing assessment. We should have been looking at it a long time ago. And I think the thing which is coming very much to the fore, you can't, look, we can't tell whether people are using AI or not. The Turing tests to say is AI don't work. So one of the answers is authentic assessment. We're using real world assessment. Instead of testing students in completing tests, authentic assessment methods are designed to assess knowledge and test how students apply that knowledge in real world situations. AI can't apply that knowledge in real world situations because one of the features of generative AI is it understands no context whatsoever. So students have to use their own minds, and this is a much better form of assessment, I think. It gives students the ability to focus on how they solve problems, and it includes the opportunity for reflection or to show they're working out. Now look, reflection, metacognition is increasingly being recognized in the AI world as one of the most effective forms of learning, and I need to switch to that, and that's authentic assessment, which builds on that approach. But of course, it's not new anyway. We've been using authentic assessment for years in vocational education and training, which is increasingly competence-based, relates to real-world tasks, combines knowledge and practice, uses the tools in the job, and often uses photographic evidence. I apologize for the phone in the background, which I hope is going to stop in a moment. And moving on. How do we design assessments? I like this very much. This comes from EDUCAUR's presentation on assessment in the age of generative AI. I think it was last November. The picture comes from McGill University in USA. They talk about academic integrity, and they talk about identity verification, assessment security. But I think the top one is what's introduced, and the bottom one. Sound pedagogy, which means we're aligning to learning outcomes, and we allow multiple varied opportunities to demonstrate learning. That's very important. Different opportunities, different ways. But look, wellness. How often have we really considered wellness when we're relating to assessment? Are we making choices which make life well for the students and for the instructors? I'd say no. I'd say that a lot of people I know, a lot of students I've talked to, a lot of students I met are terrified of assessment, and it stresses them out. And we shouldn't be making it hard for them. We should be making it easy for them to show their learning. And another thing we're starting to do with authentic assessment as well is to embed assessment into the learning process. So, enhanced question types, measuring complex competencies, providing real-time feedback to learners, real-time feedback, because that real-time feedback allows them to reflect on their learning and see where they can improve their learning. Increasing accessibility to assessment. It's not always easy to be assessed. Adapting to learner ability and knowledge, and generative AI can help us a lot in that. I'm learning Spanish on Duolingo. I don't know how many of you are using Duolingo. It is the #1 most used language learning application in the world, and it heavily uses AI. When I get somewhere, I get stuck usually on the grammar bits. I have to admit, I am not great on the grammar. I got stuck on the grammar yesterday, and it's recognized that I was getting half of the questions wrong. Half of the things I was trying to learn, I was getting wrong, and it changed what it was giving me. It was adapting to my rather low ability. If I get stuff right, it makes questions harder. And that's a key thing you can do with AI. And of course, AI can give automated grading, which will be a big sigh of relief for teachers everywhere. But it can also give automated feedback. Not the thing I used to do get in school, which would be in my exercise book. I'd get a tick, red tick, to say great, or I could do get better. AI can give detailed feedback, which in more or less real time, which teachers don't have the time to do. So what are these new formats for assessment? Complex assessment tasks for performance assessments, making items more responsive and contextualized, so theoretical learning can be contextualized. And I think we have a problem in subjects like engineering. Students say to me, well, it's the maths. It's the maths. That's the main reason people drop out of doing engineering, because the maths is hard. But all too often, the mathematics is posed in a theoretical way and not in a contextualized way of its use in engineering. Of course, we can use gaming. And once more, Duolingo is heavily gamified, and I enjoy it, and it gives me motivation. We can have interactive simulations. I think you're going to see a lot more of those because generative AI is very good at generating simulations or virtual reality integrations and close to authentic scenarios. I mean, some of the interesting things I've seen for assessment is history, where people can go and talk to a historical figure. So you can tell generative AI to be King Henry VIII, and you can talk to King Henry VIII in real time. And that can be a form of assessment, formative assessment. So personalized and adaptive learning and assessment. And of course, tasks once more based on students' abilities and performance levels. And here's just some examples which I quite liked of where they built assessment into learning. This is, can't remember now. This is an American university site. I think I should put the citation in and haven't. But some really imaginative things. Generative AI claims to generate human-like text, but can we use and student team up to create a podcast interviewing ChatGPT to analyze its uses? It's really good. It's really clever. And these are all great examples, great examples. And of course, we come back to that question then, what are we assessing? We had that question of why do we assessment before, but what are we assessing? I love this picture. I absolutely love this picture. And the suggestion is that we should be looking at complex and higher order learning outcomes like problem solving and non-cognitive abilities, self-discipline, motivation, persistence, teamwork, analytical thinking, creativity, adaptability, leadership, resilience. We've traditionally not been assessing these things, but these things are important for learning. They're really important for learning. And once more, as I said it before, learning can be demonstrated in different ways. We can have interaction, we can have feedback, we can have artifacts, not just exam papers. We can do this in many, many different ways. Now, of course, we've been using technology for some time and advanced technologies and AI in learning analytics. In most of our countries, we'll have some forms of analytics. The classic definition, learning analytics, measurement, collection, analysis, and reporting of data about learners and their contexts for understanding and optimizing learning and the environments in which it occurs. So there's another definition of assessment, isn't it? But one of the problems with learning analytics, I feel, is the way it's developed. We haven't done enough about optimizing learning and environments or understanding learning. We've used it as a tool, but all too often, certainly in UK or in USA, learning analytics is used actually to try and reduce the dropout rates because this affects the funding, but not necessarily for improving the learning. But what Rose Luckin, who's a professor of AI, been a professor of AI for 10 years, I think, in London, what she is suggesting is that we need to identify new sources of data for use in assessments. And she suggests that if we want staff in universities, lecturers in university, to understand AI, this is an exercise for them to think about what new sources of data could we use in assessment. Now, Rose suggests that we should include integrating emotional data from sensors. I am very dubious about it, and I think there is an issue here about the ethics of AI. I am going to talk, my last 3 slides will all be about ethics. But one question for you, I suppose, is we can integrate emotional data. That's quite possible to do for sensors built into your screen. Is it ethical or is it not? And so what are ethical sources of data or aren't? Now, of course, the other question which has come up and is being under big discussion now is defining AI literacy. What does it mean to be AI literate? There's all kinds of discussion going on. Application, authenticity, accountability, agency, whilst preparing students for the future workforce. So is it AI literacy part of preparing students? Is that the reason we're doing it? Or here's a definition I very much like. I'm afraid I can't pronounce the names of the people, but it's a very good paper they've written about this, about having the essential abilities people need to live, learn, and work in our digital world through AI-driven technologies. And Rose Luckin suggests that everybody needs that. Everybody needs those essential abilities that people need to live and work. And of course, people are trying to design now AI literacy frameworks. This one comes from the same authors. I think that UNESCO has just last week released an AI literacy framework themselves. But they suggest that here the framework should be knowledge and understanding of AI. You have to have some understanding of it. That doesn't mean you need to write code, but you have to understand something about how it works. The use and application of AI. What can it be used for? How can you use it? What's it good for? Evaluation and creation of AI. And I think that's a critical one for teachers or for school management. If you're going to start using AI, how do you evaluate which AI to use? There's hundreds of AIs, new ones come out every day. Of course, we all know about ChatGPT, but there's many, many more. And the open source AIs are becoming increasingly powerful. There seems to be at around GPT 4.5, it's not, no one's got ahead of it, but everyone else is catching up with it in terms of power. And there's various reasons we could discuss for that. But also essential AI skills, both technical and non-technical. And I would suggest that AI is probably the most important sector is vocational education and training, because those skills will be different in different occupations. And we need to start introducing that AI skills in now. Now, I'm working on a project called AI Pioneers. I'll tell you a bit more about it later, but AI Pioneers is looking at vocational education and training, AI in education, and at AI in adult education. One thing we have done for that is look at the skills and competencies needed by teachers and trainers in AI. And we've done that by putting an extension to the DigComp Edu framework, which is produced by the EU. And we've added new sections into it. And there you can see on those screens the way some of the examples, I couldn't have fit it all in. I can't fit a 80-page document into 2 screens, but there's some examples of what we think teachers and trainers should be able to do with AI. There's the DigComp Edu framework. It comes at different levels. I've chosen to show you an expert B2 because obviously competence varies from starter level to pioneer level, which is the highest level for innovation. That level B2 is related to, for a teacher or trainer to show that they have some expertise and that they can innovatively use AI for personal organizational growth, contributing to the wider educational community through AI-enhanced initiatives. The document, the report with all the competencies in it, is available on ResearchGate and available on our website, which I'll give you the address of later. But I think the other thing which is going on as well, and they're all interrelated, that's why I said at the start, assessment is related to future jobs and to career guidance, new careers. There is a turn to skills. Increasingly, job candidates are being assessed on their skills rather than on their degrees or more conventional credentials, or even for the role of the traditional CV application form. So it's on what people can do and putting candidates through a bespoke, strengths-based assessment designed to explore how individuals would act in work-based scenarios. So on the one hand, we have a turn towards skills, especially on the point of employers, but at the same time, we're developing new forms of assessment, which generative AI is very good at, designed to show and explore how you work in a work-based scenario. And linked to that is a turn towards capabilities. A shift towards behavioural competence components, which include aptitudes, motives, and personality traits, ranging from creativity to social capabilities. And I think that social capability is important there. So these are all, I'm not saying everything has changed, but these are changes which are ongoing. And of course, there's problems because people are using AI to do job interviews. Now, is that ethical? Is that an improvement? One people say, well, people say, well, AI can be biased, and certainly we know about it being biased. On the other hand, people say human beings are biased, and using AI levels out that level of bias in job interviews. So, what's the future of jobs then? Look, we have endless reports on the future of jobs. I would be very wary to say we know much at the moment. We do know that in a big survey in USA, many individuals were worried about the impact that, oh no, this is a UK study from the IPPR. 54% of people, young people, were worried about the impact that general AI could have on their careers. That's a lot of people worrying. Now, the use of some methods with these surveys is to try and work out how exposed some jobs are to general AI in comparison with others. And that raises important questions of how we encourage and support students and young professionals to consider their future careers. Interestingly, the report identifies roles that we often associate as requiring human touch, such as teachers and psychologists, as becoming some of the most exposed to AI technology. Previous reports have said, nah, teachers are safe, can't replace teachers. This report says they're some of the most exposed. So we can spread a bit of worry today. Now, no, it's the wrong one. Will AI augment jobs? That's one argument. It's just going to change jobs and mean we're all more productive, or will destroy jobs. There's some of the jobs that are most exposed to automation. I think a worrying point is that women are significantly more affected at the moment. 11% of tasks are exposed to generative AI, raising to 50% if companies integrate AI more deeply. And in truth, that's a long difference between 11% and 50%. And what the IPPR says is there are alternative futures, and it depends on societal decisions. It could be a job apocalypse where they just try and get rid of everyone and make huge gains in GDP, huge gains in profits for companies. But alternative future is possible if governments, employers and unions act to preserve and help create new automation safe jobs. So it's a societal decision. And that's why this debate around it needs to be as wide as possible. Worst case scenario, full displacement, all jobs at risk. Central scenario, 4.4 million jobs disappear. This is for the UK. These figures have got a population of 55 million. Best case scenario, full augmentation, all jobs at risk are augmented instead of being replaced. No job losses and an economic boost of 13%. So there's a lot of things to think about there. Here's another of these. This is one I like. This better images of AI. This image from Anton Grable is of human AI collaboration. But look, with these changes coming in, one question for educators, careers, everywhere. How do we communicate the changes to the world of work? How do we support young people to reflect on what they might mean for them as they move through their journey of life, learning and work? And don't forget the life part of that is just as important as the work part of that. Okay, careers development. I do a lot of work in careers development. At first, people said, nah, not going to affect careers because generative AI lies all the time. It's absolutely right. It does lie all the time. I know it's lie the right word. Well, now they say it hallucinates all the time, but it's a machine. Can machines hallucinate? But then we found that can be very powerful for researching careers pathways. You can practice informational interviewing techniques. Great for developing conversation starters, especially for one-to-one career counseling, marketing, filling knowledge gaps, finding sources of knowledge and LMI. It's got lots and lots of uses. This is Danny Mercer, who's a career professional, works for the University of Leicester and has done a lot of work on Gen AI, a lot of very good videos of him. He says what he uses for admin, that's the big one he says he uses for, because careers professionals are always cursing the amount of admin and reporting they have to do. And Gen AI can be very good at that. And of course, it's scalability. It empowers students to scale careers information, could generate mega prompts, augment practice, help stay relevant to climate, etc., etc. Guidance professionals are the human in the loop. And we talk a lot with general AI about needing to keep the human in the loop. I'm running a bit short of time, I guess, here. But I just start 7 minutes late. Prompting. Prompting is important, but there's just one example there of a prompt, how to prompt GPT. And it's worth learning a bit about how to prompt, but we'll move on. Now, look, I said my last 3 slides were going to be about ethics. What should we worry about? Well, we know AI is biased. We've got many examples of how AI, if you ask a picture of someone in a job, if it's a high-skilled, high-paid job, it's usually a white man. If it's a low-skilled, low-paid job, we have far more images of black people. Transparency of AI. AI is not transparent, generative AI. It's not clear what is going on. And it's not only that we don't know what's going on half the time, it's said that the scientists, the AI developers, they don't know what's going on half the time. Environmental cost. I read somewhere that every time we do a query on one of the big large language models, the LLMs, it uses the equivalent power of charging your phone. So I can sap off 10 queries in a few minutes, and that's the equivalent power of 10 charges to your phone. Hallucinations, I already talked about. The next one, commercialization and access, is a big one. I just caught that last question about access to AI. Is it making us more unequal because people can't afford access to it? Is it leading to the commercialization of education? Are the big companies seeing, because they're struggling to find actual ways of monetizing the vast amounts of money they've spent developing stuff, are they putting their eyes on education as being the big market? Privacy and security. Hype. We have far too much hype at the moment. The hype cycle is beginning to calm down a little, I think, but it's still being hyped to hell. And a lot of the things which are written about this wonderful tool are way over the top. And of course, we do need ethical frameworks. This is recommendations on the ethics of artificial intelligence from UNESCO, I think. And well worth, if you it's a Montreal Declaration, well worth going to UNESCO. UNESCO is doing a lot of work around AI and publishing some very, very good stuff. And This one came out a couple of weeks ago, but I like this very much. Publication by Zenokak, I think about 4 weeks ago, who starts talking about ethical principles, diversity and equity, privacy, data protection, sustainability, societal well-being, ethical design, commercialization. Well recommend that publication, put it into Google and ask for ethical, well, you've got the reference to it there, ethical principles in international AI, Ed guidelines, Seneca. It's very, very good. I'd like to thank you all for putting up with my computer difficulties at the start. Oh, someone's just brought me a glass of water. Thank goodness for that. Thank you very much. You want to find out more? AIpioneers.org is our project website. It's a large-scale project funded by the European Union. We have a network of AI pioneers. You do not have to be an expert in AI to join our network. We welcome anyone. We're operating on LinkedIn because that's the place where everyone's going these days. This presentation is under Creative Commons. I'm very happy for you to download this presentation yourself, to choose which slides you want to use, to translate it into other languages, to add new slides. And that's it. Oh, yes. Thanks for the invitation to talk to you today. Thanks to Daria for that. But big thanks to the translators. It must be horrible translating me, but many, many thanks. And I hope you're never replaced by AI. I far prefer human translators. Okay.
Спасибо огромное.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Edwell. Indeed, new dimensions are there, and there are many questions. We are sorry to have such a short time for the Q&A, but still, I will briefly ask questions, and you please answer them if you can. You've mentioned transversal skills that can be used in assessment. Are there ways or tools to evaluate transversal skills by using generative AI?
Yes, I'd say that generative AI is actually very good at looking at those. I mean, for instance, it's relatively simple with generative AI to create a scenario, a real world scenario, and to see how students approach that real world scenario. I mean, generative AI can generate much, which used to be a lot of work to do that, but now very good. And those transversal skills obviously can be designed to be critical for participation in that scenario.
То есть вы имеете в виду, что задать сценарий, задать рубрики...
So you mean this can be like a scenario set in the generative AI, and will generative AI assess these skills by itself, or will the educator, the teacher, make this assessment, and generative AI will be simply providing the wording of it, but the very assessment is going to be done by the educator? What are the options?
It depends what we're doing that assessment for, doesn't it? It's once more, I see the big potential here as formative AI, formative assessment to give feedback to the students. And yes, certainly the AI can give feedback in real time to the students. It's not a matter of putting a mark on it, is it? It's a matter of giving students feedback. That's the key for this form of assessment.
Окей, спасибо.
Okay, thank you. Shall every college or university have a special unit or expert on development and application of generative AI in the educational process? And how can we nudge the administrators of educational institutions to employ such an expert or to launch such a unit?
Look, a lot depends on what your educational institution is doing. Certainly, I think that every institution needs an AI pioneer. That doesn't have to be an expert. Of course, if you want to develop applications using AI, you're going to need some degree of programming. I would really see it as a question of not every institution having their own and copying each other, because that's resource heavy. I think that this is a case where we need networks of schools and colleges or universities, especially because, let's face it, the universities have got the skilled staff to work together. One of my concerns would be that the private sector is paying much higher than the public sector, and especially paying for AI developers and data experts. And that may be tempting and maybe taking expertise out of the education sector at the moment. And that's a question I think needs to be thought about hard at a policy level.
Спасибо большое. Ну и на завершение.
Thank you. And at the end, we have a very practical question. This is again about assessment. Imagine a situation, there's a student who submits an essay where we, teachers, can see a prompt like write an essay and ensure that I get a high score. So what can we do in order to avoid such situations? And I probably think that the students should read before they submit.
Well,
so despite all the efforts, this information leaked, and you can see it when assessing this test, this essay.
Well, the first thing to say is that at the moment, AI, these tools which say we can test to see whether they've used AI don't work. And in fact, they're particularly dangerous because they give false assessments and especially tends to penalize people who are using a second language. So those tests don't work. So the first thing is you don't know whether they've used AI or not. Of course, we know there's some words which some particular AIs like to use. For instance, delve is particularly interesting. There's an English word called delve, which is little used, but GPT, OpenAI GPT, uses it a lot. And that's because they use human people who are working on the AI. They outsource to Africa. And delve is used in English in Nigeria a great deal. It's not used. I've never used the word delve myself. So you could guess then. But no, look, that's why we need to move to authentic assessment. The old essay model is not a great model and it's broken. Of course, students need to learn how to write essays. And at that point, I think it's an ethical question for the students. So students need to know whether they should be using AI, if they shouldn't be using AI, or if it's in the middle, then they say they've used AI, etc. So we need a consistent policy, and we need to explain to students why we've got that policy. It's not to stop them cheating, it's to help their learning. So the policy they need to understand the point of the policy, why it's there, and how they should behave in that situation. And we have to rely on them to do it. No simple answer.
Спасибо большое.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Professor Atwood. Dr. Atwood, thank you for answering our questions and thank you for referring to various resources. And I think that our participants will be happy to study them and they will scrutinize your presentation and slides again and again. Thank you very much for giving us the links. So have a nice day and we continue our pipeline.